Hello everyone, welcome back to again the introduction part of civil engineering model number 2. In the model number 2, we will go for studying the concepts related to the essentiality of sustainable developmental goals. In the last previous class you have studied. In today's part of the class, let us get to study the concepts related to the smart city. As the name indicates that the term smartness mainly inculcates the usage of the technology. The usage of the technology in the sense means usage of the Internet of Things, using artificial intelligence, as well as the usage of the blockchain technologies. These are all the different set of the computerized technologies that we are going to adopt, as well as information and telecommunication technologies are being imbibed in the concept of smart cities. As the cities are tending to urbanize, that means there is a huge amount of the rise in the residential commodities as well as even the settlements towards the cities from the urban or maybe from the town or municipal town area to the city. Because almost all the 55% of the world's population lives in the cities. In addition to this, whenever the 55% will remain the same, no. There is a rise in the upcoming part of the decades. We might have also get to see that it has been reported statistically that there is an enormous increase, that to about more than 66% of the rise in urbanization towards the cities. Thereby, any of the cities, when it is going to get expanded up due to the rapid urbanization as well as the technological advancement in the society and where the people used for that particular set is required. Now, how does the smart city will tend to look like? Why there is a need for the smart cities? We already have a cities, but what is the essentiality of the smart cities? In the literal sense, as I have told that there is a increase in the usage of the technological tools as well as in advancement, they are required for controlling certain aspects. That means in the e-governance, we are going to call it as, related to the citizens' grievance addressal systems, or maybe in the case of using the energy, that too which will tend to reduce the amount of the usage of the non-renewable energy resources, and that we are shifting phase to usage of the renewable energy. Sensors are required in order to have the surveillance of the people, in order to make sure that the cities are safe enough from any of the anti-national elemental threat as well as even the local threat also, as well as we also require the cities to capture any of the crime events or maybe any other accidents that has to be reduced. So for that purpose, there is one more emergence of the cities that we call it as safe cities also. Now, in the case of the smart city, why it is essential means today there is a usage of the resources. When the resources have been used to the maximum extent, even there is also a wastage of the resources. Now there is a challenge that how intelligently, being as a citizen responsible for it, and by using all sorts of the technologies, we go for the optimal usage of resources. The optimal usage of the resources is the one which we go for taking apart. So, efficiently if we go for using the resources and minimize the wastages as well as the pollutional problem that is taking place in the society, That is a major motto or the mission behind the approval of the smart cities. So India has planned more than hundreds of cities to be as smart cities. So that too, what about in our Karnataka? So in our Karnataka, we have Dharwad, Hubli in Dharwad, Mangalore, Belagavi, as well as even they have also given for the Davangere, and in addition to that, Tumkur region and some portion of the Bangalore regions, they have been taken up for the development of the smart cities. The next thing is, if at all of the smart city are to be applicable, if they are proposed, how effectively they will be going to tend to work? First of all, they need to have a proposal. So, which kind of the city, how do they go for implementation, what are the essential components to be there for, to be stating it as a smart city. So, for this we need to get to know what are the essential components of the smart city. So, here mainly, as I told, that by usage of the resources to be in an intelligent manner by the usage of the sensors. Either maybe in terms of an industry or maybe in terms of an usage of the resource, and in order to see the tracking of the solid waste and to be disposed in a proper manner, that is also being based upon the sensor approaches. These development of the sensors, for example, the weather forecasting, what is the humidity or the temperature at this particular instance of a time, what they are going to do, first of all, the sensors are to be built up, they will be going to collect all those data, and we have a data bank from which the statistical approaches can be derived in order to utilize how efficiently we can able to manage the system, whether it is running in the track as per the norms or the plans, or it is deviating from the track. So for that purpose itself only, we need to go for analysis, and then we have the communication action to be taken up. That is the fourth element that we have. So data collection, analysis, communication and action. Because citizens will tend to have varieties of the problems. For example, we need to pay the bills. The old members, they can't able to walk. So at least if you're going to build some part of an app so that they can able to pay the bills online itself only. Like that, the online part of the system shall also be provided. So the data collection as well as analysis will lead to the communication along the varieties of the sectors, and then what are the actions to be taken. So what are the remedial measures that we can able to adopt, that can be done in the case of this components of the smart cities. So what are the essential components? So what are the essential components are required? Mainly computer science, information technology, remote sensing, as well as the usage of the multimedia. These are essentially required. And in addition to this, what are the set of the problems that we are facing in the urbanization? There might be urban flood. So there might be lacking of the aesthetic condition of the city. And meanwhile, if you're going to see the densely populated areas, they have built up in a haphazard manner. There is no proper surface resources, water resources. There is a shortage of the resources. How well that you can able to plan in an essential manner. And in that case, we have to move across for fetching up what are the essential components where this smart city can be adopted. Given that it is going to cater all the needs and the requirements of the society. But the major important thing it is, smart city is based upon the sustainable practices that too, that as I told, it is the status of the well-being of the people, because in the case of the smart cities, the standard of living of the people as well as even the usage of the resources and even the transportation system, even if you're going to take what are the commercial aspects, all these things, they are like a flooded one. Now, how to control all these aspects in a given substantial manner or in a planned manner, that we have to take it in the form of an attribute. Attributes mainly hold up with the technological innovation. The key point is where we are going to hold the technological innovation for the sustainable approaches. Now, what are the following essential components that we have to come across in the case of the smart cities? Moreover, it also enables the public and private partnership. Public and private partnership. Innovation as well as even the public-private partnership, when one it is built up in an effective manner, then the concept of the smart cities will be suitably adopted in the next upcoming decades also. So likewise, let us get to know what are the essential components for the smart cities. The essential components of smart cities are, first one is intelligence transport system. Yes, where we can able to adopt. We can able to adopt mainly in the cases of the buses as well as metros and even the railway station. Normally it is adopted in the first phase like for the buses and even for the railways. We have a rail app, isn't it? So based upon that we can able to notice where the train is coming, if there is any other delay in the trains, so to what time it is going to reach the next station, everything is given up there. And similarly in the case of the metros. Now other thing it is, intelligence transport system can also able to reduce the traffic congestion. Traffic congestion. The reason for the traffic congestion means when there is a huge part of this lanes or the ways where the roads are completely for the vehicles. In the Bangalore you can able to see Whitefield or Keyapuram, or maybe in the case of Electronic City, moreover in the case of the Kengeri Surf you can able to see. Thereby there are certain kinds of the traffic congestion that is taking place. So when there is a junction, so in that we need to avoid the traffic congestion. Thereby upon making some of the alternative arrangements as well as even the pathways for them, we can able to reduce it. As well as even for the intelligence transport system can also aid for the public parking facilities. So where the parking is feasible across the roads where you want it to drop, you get an information based upon the availability. And thereby it aids in a helpful traffic management. The digital infrastructure. What does the digital infrastructure mainly refers to? Digital infrastructure mainly refers to the provision of the broadband activities that has to be placed, and that too the network coverage area has to be exposed to the maximum extent. That means there shall be the maximum network coverage area. So based upon that, nowadays we have a DTH as well as a Wi-Fi. Normally in any of the offices or in institutions, it is becoming we call it as an order of the day. So without that, we can't able to do any such kind of the works or activities. Apart from the companies which requires the Wi-Fi as well as the broadband, even that infrastructure has to be displayed here also. So that itself are to be taken up. So Wi-Fi, so hotspot. Even in the case of the railways, they also, or maybe in the case of the railways also, they go for providing the Wi-Fi hotspot facilities where you can able to go for using it in an efficient manner. So that is what we're going to call it as the digital infrastructure. It is not only in the case of the homes or maybe in the offices or in institutions, it is also applicable in the transportation part of the systems. Nowadays, we can also go for seeing any of the public meetings or maybe any of the closed door meetings. There is a requirement of the Wi-Fi facilities. Even the hotels or the restaurants will also tend to provide the Wi-Fi facilities. And in such manner that we could able to find out the numerous amount of the applications related to the usage of the Wi-Fi. Across even the usage of the smart grids. So smart grids do play an important role, wherein amount of the connectivity or maybe any of the network issues can be resolved by placing across the smart grids across the particular regions. Next, moving on to the next one that we take up is related to the e-governance activity. What does the e-governance activities mainly do? They do have play a very important role. Nowadays, if you wanted to go for enrolling for Aadhaar or for ration card, you need to go for like what we have like a Mysore one or Karnataka one, what we have like a Bangalore one. So it is a citizens service center. If at all, if you wanted to have certain applications, that means you need to pay some of the loans or related to any of the scholarships if it is required, or any of the water supply bill or electricity bill that you need to pay. All these things can be done by the e-governance that we have the citizenship. We have a portal also there, and the service center is also available in the on-site in the nearby areas they are located. So with the aid of that, they can able to deploy it and provide the services. Even in the case of the digital infrastructure also, they do go for providing the services. Nowadays, we are to go for using the Wi-Fi along with respect to the normal cable network, isn't it, the DTH connections. So that is also coming under the category of the digital infrastructure. Next, in the case of the e-governance, as I told that it is a digital platform for online bill payment. So if you need to have even the paying of any of the house tax, any other things can also be done by this program. So any of the issues that has been arise or the grievances can also be addressed here. So the grievances can also be addressed here. So based upon the service request. The next thing that we come across, especially after the e-governance, it is mainly related to the waste management plans. Waste management plans means where the amount of the solid waste that is getting deposited on a day-to-day basis, that is going to create a numerous problem. So for that purpose, we need to have a solution or the remedy. What kind of the solution or the remedy that we are going to speak up in the case of the clean cities much more. So in the case of the smart cities, what you need to done, because here in the case of the waste management, especially you need to have the solid waste management starting from the collection of the solid waste to the disposal. It has to be done in a proper manner, either onto the landfill or onto the treatment. Thereby, the amount of the solid waste tracking can be done by the usage of the optimal routing, which has to be the collection part, and how we can able to efficiently reduce the segregation. Either you can also involve the recycling activity, so recycling activity, and what are the things that can be subjected for the reuse, and again we can able to revive it back in one or the other manner. So the plastic mess or maybe even the e-waste is also one of the upcoming cases that can also be done if it is properly planned. So that is where the smart cities will tend to give much more preferences for solving the waste related problems. It may be the solid waste, as I told, and even for the hazardous waste management. Next thing it is energy efficiency and renewable resources. What do you mean by the energy efficiency? Whatever the energy now we are going to use it, there is again certain loss of energy that is getting unnoticed. Without knowingly or unknowingly, in our homes only we'll be going to switch on some of the TVs, or maybe we're going to forget about switching off some of the lights when we are not in a home. Likewise, in an institution there is a loss of an energy. Thereby, the smart sensor techniques are required. So what happens? In the place where the people are present, automatically the lights will be going to turn on. And of course, even the remote control can also be accessed there. In the absence of the people, automatically it is going to turn it off. Such kind of the efficiency, that too in the case of the proper lighting system, has to be provided. Lighting systems has to be provided. In addition to that, we are all solely dependent upon the traditional part of the energy that is derived either from the hydroelectricity power or maybe coal-fired power plant. So here, usage of the renewable energy resources mainly gives the preferences on usage of the solar energy panels. The solar energy panels are effectively utilized so that for any institutions or commercial aspects, and even in the case of the trains also nowadays, they are going to use the solar panels where certain amount of the power up, they can use it in a hybrid mode. Even in the case of an buildings also, to be a part of the smart buildings, they go for using even the rooftop solar panels, which they go for installing it. the whatever the energy that is gained across, so that will also be added as a, we call it as the backup part of the energy in case if there is a power fluctuations or the variations upon the supply of the normal electricity. So if the cities become self-reliant with the usage of the solar panels, or in the form of its indirect usages in the form of the wind energies, because wind energy has its some part of the limitations, but solar energy can be widely used, especially for the reduction of the usages of the other energy. So that too we come for the usages of the biofuels or maybe the generators. Instead of that, you can have the solar energy panels. Once it is installed in the rooftop, what happens, the next step it is to utilize that energy, and then you can use it for any of the lighting systems or maybe for running of some of the machines also, selective machines that we can able to do it. And that will depend upon the type of the institutions, or maybe in the residential, or maybe in the case of an industries, that will depends upon the type of an operation. So this itself, energy efficiency, will tend to have an impact upon for the smart buildings. And that totally together we are going to call it as energy efficient buildings. With the optimal usage of the energy. There is no wastage of the energy, that has been fully utilized here. So what we call it as a smart building and infrastructure normally the smart building or infrastructure mainly refers to usage of the proper designing as well as even the planning in an efficient manner to see that orientation of the sun, the heating of the building, as well as providing the proper ventilation facilities, that we are going to call it as heat, vacuum, as well as air conditioning system, HVAC. That has to be in a proper, that is what we are going to call it as the building services. And if it is properly designed in a scientific manner to overcome all those set difficulties, as the customized part of the version, where the customer requires so and so part of an equities as well as in usage of the work, and in that cases the smart buildings will be going to tend to play a very important role. So what happens, need to provide the proper ventilation, that is the one. Second thing, smart buildings shall also tend to have the minimal usage of the resources, as well as the buildings when it is in an operative mode, whatever the waste or the liquid that is arising, that has to be treated and then it has to be reused. For that itself only the sensors have to be placed. And then the reuse means it can be utilized for the irrigation purpose or maybe for the secondary purpose, that can be done. Thereby you can able to avoid even the waste that is letting into the normal drains, the sewerage systems. Other most important thing it is, you need to come up with the greeneries. That is also there in the case of the smart cities. So likewise, if we go for providing the buildings which are in what are the components of the smart buildings, that we will be going to take up in the next part of the classes. So apart from this, we also have even the safest consideration, because city should also be saved. That to what? Safety and security. Safety and security mainly refers to what? Not only the physical protection, it is also to ensure that the cities are free from any of the miscreants who will tend to cause harm for the people or to the society. Thereby We need to have the CCTV for the surveillance and track the movement. You need to have an additional devices for recording it and to retrieve it, and also to reduce the amount of the crime action. Moreover, mental health is important. So if one part of the city is distorted with some of the horrendous part of an act, obviously the question arises, how safe is the city? If there is a hoax bomb call, then again the question arises whether the city is safe or not. Likewise, that has to be controlled, and for this we need to have the intelligence department to control, to keep the cities to be in a safe as well as decrease the rate of the crime activities. So that is what the security is also is required. So security in the terms, they have to be adopted in all the places, because any unknown person cannot be coming inside any of the offices or institutions or to any other governmental organizations. Likewise, any of the miscreants cannot do as what you can also able to think about what has happened in the Mumbai attack. Okay, so that is another aspect. It is in the safety consideration is to provide the proper lighting systems. So in the cases where the roads have been constructed, there is a lack of lighting systems. Due to the lack of the lighting systems, the accidents will also tend to take place. So for that purpose, you need to provide proper lighting systems. Proper traffic signals as well as a traffic sign marks have to be given. Otherwise, what happens? If any of the work is under the construction, directly any of the vehicles will tend to hit, there is a loss of life. That should also be prevented. And even in the case of the traffic movement, the vehicle will also get an accident. So that should also be avoided by the proper surveillance. That's why that has to be tracked upon. That comes under the safety as well as the security. How road is safe, how the railways are getting safe without any collusion. Smart tracking systems have to be adopted there. So moving on to the next one. So provision for open spaces. Provision for the open space mainly refers to here. You need to provide the parks as well as even the playgrounds. And in addition to that, there shall be some recreational activities also. For example, if you move across for the Caris, we have a fountains and everything, right? So even in the case of the Mysore exhibition, that is also mainly meant for the recreational activities. There also you can able to get to see what are the usages of the resources, how optimally they go for using it. So if that is provided, more number of the trees are grown, obviously certain amount of the urban floodings can also be reduced. That too, it has to be planned in a proper manner. In absence of all these things, there is a reduction in the amount of the oxygen supply. Otherwise, it was going to turn up in the form of the heat island effect. That should not tend to happen, in that too in the case of the smart cities. So a list, that too we have a proper list of the features, that are the ground features, as well as even the parks, everything that has to be placed. A separate stretch of the land has to be given for the set of the utilization. That is mainly dependent upon the land use and land pattern. The last one, it is, after telling all this smart city means, there shall also be a smart education. Without this, it is going to be incomplete. So in today's part of the world, the digitization or the digital education has risen up. If you're going to take the Coursera or maybe even in the case of the edX, there are many more massive open online courses platforms and even in our Indian NPTEL courses, right? So apart from that, what we have, the online courses for the skill development, okay, that should be enhanced here. And even the smart classrooms are essential, because we can't able to teach like a blind student how the elephant is going to look like, right? So for that purpose, what is the role that is played and how does the smart classrooms, obviously the pictorial representation as well as the animated videos will tend to serve some of the basis that the young minds of the people as well as even the children's are going to get to know what exactly it is rather than drawing the pictures. That is also the primary extent. And the next level that you need to take is related to the smart classrooms. And then the way of the conduction of the classes, or maybe in the case of the smart education again with respect to the healthcare aspect. It has to facilitate the healthcare and it should also create then awareness amongst people. That is a major motto. Otherwise, this will be like a cross mark. So there are varieties of the e-learning platform, as I told. So that can be made use for retrieving for the development of the smart nation apart from the smart city. So this is what you're going to learn wholly related to what is meant by the smart cities. So these are all the criteria. If these criteria have been met, then the proposal actions will be given and slowly phase by phase the government will be going to that too for the Ministry of the Urban Development Board, and they do have certain objective as well as the deadlines, what are the things to be met over a next 5, 15 or maybe 20 years plan for that. Okay, so these are all the components to be taken up, that too to be having the innovation from the education and technically to be soundly sustainable. That approach is essential here. If that is not there, then the whole society or an economy will be under the loss in one or the other manner. Means, if you're going to give the preference for the economy to be more by setting to see that the amount of the requirement or the protection of the environment is not given, then this will not be sustainable. So that is what we are going to come across in the case of the sustainable part of the cities. Okay. So let us move on for the next topic, that is clean city. As the name suggests, that the city which is completely aesthetic in appearances and which looks pleasant. Okay, so they are pleasant in appearance. That is what we are going to call it as a clean city. Why there is a requirement or the necessity of clean city? Why the cities are managing, right? But why there is a requirement of the clean city? There are several set of the reasons and several part of the challenges due to the rapid urbanization. There are certain problems that has been unnoticed, or intentionally they will be going to keep it as an unnoticed manner. For example, if there is a huge growth in the population of the particular city, there is a requirement of the water, there is a requirement of an electricity, as well as there is a requirement of varieties of the products. When the varieties of the products have been utilized, starting from the brush or the soap or the paste that we are going to use it, till the end, what are the things that we are going to wear it, everything will be going to become a waste one or the other day. So when they are going to become a waste one or the other day, what are the measures that we have to take it across? For example, you have an electronic gadgets that have several years of warranty. After that, what we are going to do? Either we are going to sell it up for some other person, XYZ, or to the stores, or maybe on to any of the maybe electronic waste collection center. If the mind has such kind of a perception or an attitude, then it is fine. Otherwise, what? Throw it wherever it is required. So that has led to the problems. So due to the exploitation of the resources, has become the major crisis even for the depletion of, or what we are going to call it as the urbanization effect, has led to the formation of the water scarcity, rise in different pollution problems. It may be in terms of an air pollution due to vehicles, or maybe the water pollution. The water pollution is mainly based upon the industry as well as even the domestic release. Then, what about in the case of the solid entities? We have a solid waste disposal problem, as well as we also have a construction and demolition waste disposal. So due to the over exploitation of the resources, obviously what happens? There is a rise in the problems. What are the problems that we are going to face it? Based upon the air pollution, today we are going to face the cancer as well as lung infections. And water pollution will tend to give rise to waterborne diseases like diarrhea, typhoid, dysentery, or maybe in the case of the jaundice and malaria. Again, from the solid waste disposal, we are going to face even the groundwater contamination. So when they have been disposed, it becomes a huge cost for us to go for the remediation of this aspect, the contaminated part of the things. Thereby, simply telling it as a clean city, that means you have to be aesthetically, it has to look right. But to look it in an aesthetic condition, these are all the challenges that we are going to come in a daily basis. Because again, there is a drop of the waste in the public places. If you see the railways, or maybe the bus, or maybe in the market, obviously they can able to manage it. But you need to provide there also the proper arrangement as well as the management facilities. So due to the disposal of the domestic waste, there is an entry of the toxic elements into the water, thereby which will tend to damage the aquatic ecosystem. When they are going to tend to damage the aquatic ecosystem, obviously the food chain will be under the threat. The next thing, what happens if the same food chain is continued to the human linkage, thereby there is a excess amount of the toxic levels that will be present in the body of the humans. That is what we're going to call it as a bioaccumulation in the one sense, or maybe the magnification, the increase in the amount of the toxic level, that we call it as biomagnification. So indirectly what we are going to get, whatever the pollutions that the contribution has been taken place over the past decades, couple of decades ago, that today we are facing it. There is an acute shortage, drying up of the lakes and everything, and then making it that in the form of the constructional area, what happens, or not in the case of the construction, mainly for the encroachment of the land that is taking place. So that encroachment of the land will lead to certain discrepancies, loss of the habitat. So thereby, we need to make sure that the fertility of the land has to be retained. Second thing, it is measures how we can able to take it up. Again, what happens, apart from the air pollution, there is a huge impact. There is what we are going to call it as contribution to the climate change. Contribution to the climate change. That in turn, we are going to see the increase in the temperature, and that has resulted in seasonal fluctuation. If you're going to take the Yamuna river flowing next to the Taj Mahal, the scene is quite disappointing. It's heartrending. Very painful to see, because look at the picture there. In the case of the Yamuna river, what is the status? Can we call that, that to being under the capital of Delhi, can we have this kind of the problems? No. That means we have to put a full stop for all these things. That means we have to act now itself only. So we need to frame sort of the rules and regulations to be avoided, and then only we can able to confront all these problems. So what are the things that we have to do here? First thing, it is promote awareness among the society. The measures to be taken for the clean city. So the first thing, it is mainly related to promoting awareness related to the environment. What is that to be done? We are going to see the people who are having the defecating onto the walls or passing of the urine. That itself will be going to tend to spread the set of the diseases. First, that things that has to be curbed out. So likewise, in the sense, we need to maintain a proper hygiene and sanitation. The first thing, it is you need to create an awareness related to the personal hygiene and sanitation. So promote the usage of the public toilet utilities. That is what the case of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, that is why the clean city has come into an existence. Okay? So that means what are the ways that has to be collected? You need to go for promoting some of the activities of awareness campaigns. And nowadays we can also get to see that even at the houses, you have what we call it as a red color as well as a green color type of the bins. So one is to collect for the wet waste as well as the dry waste. That means if the awareness is given, definitely if the strict rules that can be followed, thereby the waste segregation, instead of getting it as a commingled type of the solid waste, that we can able to reduce it. As well as one more thing, starting at the childhood level only, the part of an education has to be given. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to change their way of an attitude. So thereby, we can able to get to see that personal hygiene and sanitation and overall sanitation to be maintained, and activities on the awareness campaigns. So holding a rally or maybe also to create an awareness. And then we also come across for the NGOs activities, non-governmental organization activities. We also call it as cleanup activities. You might have seen in our Karnataka also how some part of the Kaveri river was completely filled up with the clothes as well as deposition of some of the other things. So that can be reduced even in some part of the Subramania river as well as even in the Dharmasthala also. So the campaign as well as the youth members, they have taken part actively in cleaning up of these activities. That contention has to come across our citizens. The next important thing it is, in order to see what are the measures that we can able to reduce the amount of the wastage instead of being called as a dirty city to be turned up as an aesthetic condition. You need to have a certain appointed for the rules. That means what? Spitting or maybe wherever it is required onto the walls or anything that shall be prohibited. Otherwise, whatever the clean cities, it will be only for a one-day paper show. That should not tend to happen. So the rules or the regulations or maybe the fine, so the penalty has to be driven. It has to be made mandatory. Then only the people will be going to get to know. If you catch a hold of one or two persons, or maybe the third persons will be going to get to know. That's why they will be going to write in a board or something else. So do not go for throwing out any of the solid waste, and that particular region is not meant for it. You have the other set of the regions where you can able to drop the waste onto the containers. The next aspect that you come across is in order to reduce the amount of the emissions of the air pollution. So reducing the amount of the air pollution emission, obviously what happens, there is a huge amount of the vehicular usages nowadays. We can't able to control it, but we can able to control by providing certain part of the technology which will be going to cut down the carbon emission. Okay. So not only in the vehicles, even in the case of an industries, if they go for planning it out, even all they can also become a part of the clean city, where if they're going to cut down the carbon emissions, that is what we're going to call it as carbon footprint to be cut down. So cut down the carbon footprint. How much amount of the carbon has been emitted in all such kind of an activities. That is what we're going to call it as a carbon footprint. And we also have the carbon credits, where that can be shared from one part of an organization to another organizations in order to make sure that the proper fundings are also available in order to maintain the emissions to the minimal standards. Next, we also have we call it as a bicycle sharing system. So some of the countries, they have adopted, instead of one person moving on there, 2 or 3 persons, that too with a long part of the bicycles can also be taken up. So that is one of the extent. And nowadays we also have a Chinchin in Mysore. So in order to promote the part of the movement where you can able to use the cycles wherever or whenever it is essentially required. So that is one part we go for having an essentiality requirement. We need to have the setting up of waste collection centers. That too, we have waste collection centers for handling that to the plastic as well as even the e-waste. Have a proper, we call it as a solid waste management that is required, mainly in order to have the efficient utilization. Like what is that we have? You can convert the solid waste into an energy, that we call it as energy conversion. And you can generate even electricity, provided that the carbon energy sources and energy content is high. Then also you can also move across for the composting process that is going to yield you a manure, or what we call it as fertilizers that can be utilized for the growth of the plants, and yield can also be in a better manner. Next thing it is, again, you can also go for the biogas generation. Due to the anaerobic decomposition of the completely biodegradable part of the solid waste. For example, if you're going to see the Devaraja market, you can able to collect huge amount of the, especially the vegetable waste, the floral waste, everything that is coming across, and some part of the animal waste. Clubbed together, we have a plant. That too where, especially in the case of the KR market in Bangalore, they already have established the dome-shaped type of the biogas generation plant where they can also able to generate the biogas. That biogas can also be utilized even for the electricity production, or maybe for the local utilizations can also be done there. Apart from that, we also have, reduce the amount of the, that means proper settlement as well as usage of the construction and demolition waste. So recycle and reuse of construction and demolition waste. It's a big part of the challenges in our developing part of the nations, so that wherever the illegal dumping or the disposal, wherever it is, cannot be done. On the roadside or any other near to the river region, that itself will be going to tend to ruin the quality of the water also. Thereby we have to reduce even the water pollution. So keeping the city means a portion in which if the river is also flowing across the city, even that should also be clean. That is also the major thing that we come across in the case of the pleasant in appearances. And providing the public toilet facilities, apart from that you should also go for providing the e-toilet facilities. So the e-toilet facilities are to be provided. So people who are walking along the public, or if they are going to find a way for the nature call, so they can go for utilizing this. This, a part of the smart city plan, can also imbibe the concept of the usage of the eco toilet. So if these things are satisfied, then we can able to call it as a clean city. And proper segregation, that too, if it is done in the case of the effective solid waste management. So color coding is what I have told now, that if it is properly implemented, then we can able to take on the air activities. Meanwhile, in addition to that, whatever the dust or any other storms that are coming across, that is the natural instinct. So here we can able to reduce it to the certain extent through the proper design and the collection of the drainage system. So proper design of drainage system, and in addition to this, we need to have a proper wastewater treatment plant. That too where? In the case of the decentralized system. for each apartments and everything. If you're going to get a mandatory for it, then there is not an issue for. So there only they have to go for utilizing. These are the techniques in which the clean city can able to prevail. And even the biomedical waste that are arising has to be properly managed. We have several disposal facilities and proper provision. At the last that we come across, it is the landfill activities. Proper landfill has to be provided. The site has to be provided. Otherwise, it is going to become a rather big issue. So I hope you people might have understood what are the essential concepts related to the smart city as well as even the clean city. So in the next part of the class, we shall take upon for what is meant by the safe part of the city as well as building environment, and we shall continue the next part of the class. I hope you people have understood. So thank you one and all.